The pop cultural thing happening right now is the presidential election. The difference between a close election and a landslide election is not actually that many votes.
At least if the polls are accurate this time around, which is a big caveat, because the last two election cycles, polls have been off and Trump has outperformed the polls significantly in both of those races.
I went down to the Trump rally at the Gas South station in Duluth, Georgia. Big black community turnout, big Asian community turnout, big Latino community turnout. It felt like what I was told every day growing up as a child: this is America. If we cannot have a free and fair election, then we've got nothing.
Hello, and welcome to the Pop Culture Contrarian podcast with Thomas, Sterling, and Andrew.
Hello.
Hey, guys.
So today we're bringing you a special episode, a little bit outside our normal episode topics. We're going to be talking about the 2024 presidential election because, well, it's the biggest thing on TV right now.
Yeah, we've talked about the zeitgeist of the moment.
The pop cultural thing happening right now is the presidential election.
And it's a pop cultural thing as much as it is a cultural thing.
And there's been some really big pop cultural moments on that in the past week.
Yep.
But first, so how did we get here? So Trump began his race for the 2024 presidential election earlier than I think anyone ever has, right? It was right after the 2022 midterms that he announced he was running for president.
Yeah, you can make the argument that he began in 2020 after.
You certainly can.
Sure. There were a number of, I guess, election certification rallies.
Yeah, but to be fair, we didn't know that he didn't declare until 2022.
Right.
But even that was earlier
after the midterms, I think.
Even declaring in 2022 is still earlier than almost anyone ever does declare for president.
Yeah, I don't know for certain, but yeah, it sounds probably true.
Yeah. Well, other people were waiting until, early 2023 to announce. So, he was announced before everybody else. He was certainly the first one to announce this cycle.
It was not unexpected, put it that way.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. Everyone knew Trump was running for president.
Yeah.
So a lot's happened. There was a primary where a lot of people thought maybe Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley could take it away from Trump. Did not happen. It was never in doubt. Trump never even showed up to these debates and won the primaries handily. And then Joe Biden ran in his primary pretty much unopposed. There were a couple people out there saying, hey, Joe can't do this.
But don't forget RFK Jr. He was the biggest name there.
He was the biggest name. He was certainly the biggest name running against Biden, but they kicked him out of the Democrat Party. So, he wasn't even going to be on the ballot for these primary races. So eventually he just left and said, I'm an independent.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if I would say they kicked him out. He recognized that they weren't going to allow him, as he put it, to be able to become the nominee. And so he sure. They didn't say, RFK, you can't be a Democrat, but what they did do was change every rule to make it clear, RFK, you can't be a Democrat on this election cycle. Well, yeah, you can make the argument they were hedging their bets to try to prevent anybody but Biden from winning it.
Nothing like a little rule changing to make you win.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what they did. They made sure Biden won, and then they shivved Biden and installed Kamala Harris without winning a single vote.
Yes, the party of Save Democracy, it effectively created a coup, deposed the sitting president, installed an unelected, sitting VP, and then acted like everything was fine.
Right.
We are protecting democracy. We're the
people.
Party of democracy.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Yeah. Just for a little bit of clarity, she was elected VP in 2020. She was not elected to anything in 2024.
Right. Yeah. And I guess you could make the argument that she was technically on the ballot for the primary, but not for the presidency.
And it's a truism. You don't vote for the bottom of the ticket. You vote for the top of the ticket.
Right.
Yeah. What if we went back to the era where the person who came in second ended up as the vice president?
That would be crazy. So the way that used to work is Thomas Jefferson was the VP of John Adams, and they were political rivals. So the literal result today would be Donald Trump or Kamala wins, the majority of states, and then their VP is Donald Trump. VP is Donald Trump.
Yeah. That would be...
If we had retained that system past the first 10 years or so our country,
We
there would have been a
exist.
lot more assassinations.
Yeah, we would not exist in the up until recently relatively civil manner.
Right. Yeah. Well, and even we're still pretty civil, you know.
Yeah.
There's no rioting in the streets right this minute that I know of.
Yeah, but there's been some stuff.
There's certainly been some stuff. All right. So that's kind of how we got here. What's the state of the race today? Thomas, do you want to just share some thoughts and then we'll kind of dive in on some of these states?
On the state of the race today.
Yeah.
Well, it is a race that has tightened up significantly since, it's hard to say, based on the polling, since Kamala jumped into the race, she got a big boost from just excitement from, I would say, the base of her party. That
from not being a senile old man.
Right. That she was, she was going to come and save the party from where it was sinking into the mire of just, an
kind of despair over Joe Biden.
Yeah. Joe Biden, who was, he's too old.
Yeah.
And then everybody started to get reacquainted with who Kamala Harris is. And
The same one who just absolutely bombed in the previous bid for presidency.
Yeah, in her primary run in 2020, she did not make it to the first state primary.
Right.
She dropped out before the voting in Iowa.
Right. So it didn't go well for her. And plus, during that time, Trump was targeted by an assassin and, thankfully survived. And that really upped his profile in a way that has nobody's seen by any president in a long time.
Yeah.
Where we got this shirt from his response, which was, I think, extremely courageous, his response to that assassination attempt.
So as we're looking at it now, we're looking at two kind of campaigns going in two different directions. Mm-hmm. That's the best way to put it. At least the last 2 weeks, maybe last month, we've been kind of seeing this trend. So Kamala's campaign's been slowly sinking. Trump's been steadily rising to the point where I think the overall polling average for the nation, for popular vote, they're basically neck and neck.
Yeah. According to that, it would be a coin flip.
Right. And in the battleground states, Trump has, I think he's leading in or tied in like all of them.
It does depend who you look at. If you look at RCP, he's leading in all the battleground states. 538 still has her, up by 0.3 in some, but they report that as even.
Right.
Which is
correct. So it's razor tight, at least if the polls are accurate this time around, which is a big caveat because the last two presidential election cycles, the polls have been off and Trump has outperformed the polls significantly in both of those races. So maybe they figured it out. Maybe the pollsters have finally figured out how to poll the voters more accurately. And we're looking at a razor tight race.
Yeah, I did see a writer for RCP in a Twitter thread, an X thread, being asked, have they corrected those mistakes that caused Trump to outperform his polls the last two times? And his response on X was this emoji.
Yeah.
Which is shrugging.
Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah. So, we're telling you the things we do know, which is a little bit about how this race is going. But really, you're going to be hearing this on October 31st, Halloween. The election will be 5 days away, and no one's going to know until the votes are counted. That's pretty much where we're at.
Yes.
In some that that's always true, that you don't know until the votes are counted.
It's
but
true.
sometimes, Reagan in 84, you knew before the votes were counted.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's hard to think back on the poll. The polling is always something that comes into play, and the news hounds are the ones, watching it, and like you do, Sterling, and I do. We see like daily how the polls seem to be moving, and you're trying to extrapolate what that means and who has momentum and who seems to be lagging. All those questions and things. It's just that I think since 2016, when the polls were so bad, there's been. And I guess they just call it the Trump factor. There's just been a difficulty or an inability for the pollsters to seemingly get it right. That's the best way to put it. They were a little bit closer to right in 2020 than they were in 2016.
Yes.
But they were still off significantly in some of the battleground states.
Yeah, I think Trump did in those two about 5 points or better than the polls showed. So if the polls showed him getting, 44%, he would get closer to 49%.
Well, there's this theory that it's the quote shy Trump voter, the person who, because of the way the media has so villainized Trump, that the average Joe doesn't want to admit, or the average Trump voter doesn't want to admit that they're voting for him. And so that's what they attribute to kind of underpolling Trump support.
Yeah. So
that was time around, though, is interesting because I do think there's less of that in play. It's more people have just kind of, part of the reason is a lot of Americans are just not happy with the way the country's gone the last 3.5 years under Biden and Harris. And so they remember the good old days with Trump prior to COVID. And I think there's a whole lot more willingness to say that publicly and to say, I'm voting for him. And so it's a little different this time around, I think. And so maybe the polls are more accurate this time.
They might be more accurate. And the Democrats are arguing that the polls are actually underrepresenting their support because of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And in the midterm results we've seen since then, or the last year, 2023 results, which not big elections during off years like that, but they're saying they've outperformed every poll since then. But presidential elections are a different thing than a midterm election.
That's true. But that would be something of concern if you're a Republican, because in that scenario, she could be doing better than what the polling is showing. If enough people come out and say, hey, we want to get behind her and for that one issue. Even.
I think that is probably the driving issue, that and the narrative of the whole Save America democracy, or Save Democracy, rather. Trump's a fascist.
Yeah. And they're explicitly saying that as of yesterday, the 23rd of October.
Yeah. I mean, that one, I think I would be surprised if that actually moves the needle that much, because they've been kind of basically making this refrain for years, honestly. They're being more shrill about it right now in the last minute. People are saying that that's a sign of desperation, and it very might well be. It does.
Certainly, we've seen like half a dozen different strategies from Harris in the past couple of weeks. And the Trump strategy has basically been the same all throughout, which is go on these podcasts, do his rallies, show up at these good photo ops. He just had a fantastic photo op, maybe the best one of the campaign at McDonald's.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think Trump is a known commodity. That's the difference. People, even though Harris has been the vice president for the past, 3.5 years, I don't think that many Americans still really knew who she was. And so as she kind of stepped out, and as, people kind of breathed, at least at that moment, a sigh of relief that, old man Biden's not going to be running again, the fear of, president dying in office just from old age, it was alleviated.
Although he's still in office. He's still the president right this minute.
It's true.
But we haven't seen or heard almost anything from him.
Right. Yeah, I mean, he's been out there, but
we saw him put on one of these. That was a big deal.
So I think that
I'm gesturing to my Make America Great Again hat if you're listening.
Who are you voting for?
Yeah, I don't know. It's I've got this Trump fight shirt on and a Make America Great Again hat. I'm not sure. I'll have to make up my mind in the voting booth.
Just not a shy Trump voter.
Sterling is a shy Trump voter.
Yep. So kind of the unfortunate news for a lot of Americans this election is that for most of you, it kind of seems like your vote doesn't matter. That's not really true, but that's the way it feels if you're listening to the news, because 43 out of 50 states are not being talked about. There's 7 swing states that are being talked about that are going to decide this election.
Well, I mean, that's all in how you interpret or look at things. If people didn't vote in states that were considered not competitive, well, then those states would become competitive. The fact of the matter is you have to have those states to win. The only thing is there are certain states where, because the political divide amongst the voters is so narrow, those states become the focus because it's trying to get their electoral college votes. But it changes. It moves around through American history. What states are battleground states? It's not just the same states every election cycle.
Yeah. I mean, famously in the year 2000, Florida was the swing state. And it was, how long were they counting after election day on Florida votes?
Weeks.
It was January, right?
It was the hanging chads.
Hanging chads.
But now Florida's not really in doubt. Trump's going to win Florida. Ron DeSantis has really turned that state around and registered way more Republicans than we've ever seen before.
Well, it's the first time in state history that has more registered Republicans than Democrats.
Right.
So that's going to be, unless some unforeseen election result happens, that's a pretty sure bet that that's going for Trump.
Yeah. And for the Democrats, Georgia never used to be a swing state. It always used to be solidly red. And now it does behave more like a swing state, even though it seems like it's probably going to go red again.
It's hard to say. But generally, it is a more conservative state, and so you assume the Republican's going to do well.
Yeah. So just this is the question: where do you think these 7 swing states are going to go? So let's look at them one by one. So Nevada, not actually that big a deal. 6 electoral votes. Probably not going to decide the election, and it looks real close right now. It's at Nevada's at Trump plus 0.7 right now. So that's the difference is 0.7. Between Trump and Harris. So that's not, much to go on. Do we think this is going to go red or do we not?
I think one of the things that makes it hard to know is the proliferation of the mail-in ballots. And we've got a situation where every state kind of treats it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And some of the states, you have to request ballots and you have to prove who you are. But I do wonder about the level of mail-in ballot participation in elections, especially starting in 2020, has exploded.
Yeah.
And I think that adds a new variable that makes things hard to know exactly where they might go.
Yeah.
Yeah. It adds also I don't know how to term this. It adds to the dragging out of election results later and later and later, often even in some states to the next day or days.
Right. And you're hearing election officials in Arizona, Pennsylvania, Georgia, all say things like, if it's close, we may not know on election day.
No. And so, it's because to verify the ballot and then open it and then put it, then count it, that process takes that much longer. Mm-hmm. And they can't start, I think the law is they're not allowed to start tallying those until the day of the election.
In Pennsylvania, I know that's law. In other states, it's not the same. I don't think that's the case in Nevada. So I'm looking here at the AP advance votes results because you can actually see some of these already. And we're looking at this on October 24th, and we're seeing votes that have been not counted, but we know, was it a Democrat who cast this vote or was it a Republican, was it an independent?
Yeah.
So in Nevada, about 350,000 votes have been cast so far. And 120,000 of those are Democrats. Looks like maybe 130,000 are Republicans, and then 80,000 are a third party. So where does the third party go? That's the question here.
Well, that's
the Republicans have the edge against the Democrats, but if the third party breaks for the Democrats, then Nevada's going to go blue.
Yeah, this constant. I think this is. I feel like this is becoming more of a thing. Obviously, it's becoming more of a thing, but it's the early voting seems to be extended.
Yeah.
For a longer period. And there's this, getting the results of that to try to gauge the state of the race potentially in all these different states like we're doing right now with the results from Nevada. Now it's still all a guessing game, but you're looking at numbers and you're looking at based on their party affiliation, what potentially who they're voting for.
I hate early voting, by the way.
I think that.
Well, actually, let's talk about that for a second. Because I also, earlier this year, some of my friends they're not news hounds, they don't follow politics like we do, were asking me, when does early voting start? Or when does voting start? And I said, on election day. Because that's how I feel. That's how all elections used to go. That's how, I think that's how it should go. Unfortunately, if the Democrats are doing something, we can't ignore it. We can't say just don't do it because there is actually value to voting early. And if it's available, well, I guess you should do it because for one thing, in states like Nevada where they report, this Republican voted and it doesn't tell you who they voted for, but it tells you that Republican voted. That means the Republicans in Nevada can focus on people who haven't voted yet and they can ignore the person who already has. So it saves a lot of time and effort on the behalf of these campaigns. So
yeah, but how do they know? Or you're saying state by state? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yes. So in some states you'll know, in some states you might not. But
I see.
But the fact of whether or not you voted is public record.
Yeah.
Who you voted for, that's private. But the fact that you voted is public record.
Yeah, I mean, it adds a dynamic of how campaigns are going to work. I think both, you could say potentially positive and negative, obviously, I would say. But the whole, what has traditionally been called the October surprise, where both campaigns attempt to drop a last second bomb, as it were, that allegation or something that can turn the race just enough that it gives their candidate the advantage.
Yeah.
With early voting, that's going to be blunted. I mean, that's just the fact of the matter is people are voting, a week, 2 weeks out from an election, 3 weeks out from an election. The impact of a last minute kind of October surprise is going to be not as significant.
Yeah. On that, I'm going to try to vote on my way home today. I found out where my early voting location, it's not the same as my standard day voting location is.
So it's not election day anymore for you.
It's not election day anymore. I'm encouraging my friends to go early vote because this is what the Democrats are doing. If we want to win, we gotta play by the same rules, And so if there's when you're hearing this, this episode comes out on October 31st. If there's some big allegation against Harris or Trump on November 1st, and I've already voted, that doesn't matter. And in fact, in Tennessee, early voting ends on October 31st. So by the time you hear this, if you then hear some big allegation against one of these candidates, you cannot update your vote to reflect that. So that's kind of a bad thing. I don't think anything is going to come out that would make me change my mind about Trump or Harris at this point. And I think that's where most people are, but it could if you're really one of those fence sitters.
Right. And I don't know how all the rules work too, but let's say this hypothetical scenario where one of the candidates a week out dies.
Right.
Well, could that impact how you vote?
I think so.
I'm going to vote for a dead Trump over a live Kamala Harris any day of the week, actually.
Right. And maybe it wouldn't necessarily, but what I'm saying is there is a factor there where, and what's going to happen, and maybe this is logic too. The voter who is committed to the party almost always votes with the party. They're not going to be swayed.
Yeah.
Right. They've already made up their mind months ago who they're voting for. So you could say in that instance, their early vote really isn't going to change no matter what. Then there is the undecided, the middle segment that ebbs and flows, I guess, in size. But that segment is the one that maybe are the one you hear these stories, which I can't relate to, but these people walking into the voting booths and still not knowing who they're going to vote for.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that the candidates are appealing to. And so maybe the logic to it is this: the candidates are going to have to try to continue to appeal to the middle the entire time down to the last minute, because they have to try to get these middle undecided voters who just can't seem to know who they're going to vote for up until the very end.
Well, on that, in 2016, that was actually me. I knew I wasn't going to vote for Hillary Clinton. That one's not tough if you're anything like a conservative. But I couldn't decide if I was voting for Gary Johnson or Donald Trump. And I walked in and I tried to vote for Trump at that time, not knowing how he was going to govern. I couldn't do it. I voted for Gary Johnson. Of course, now that I've seen how he's governed, I voted for him in 2020. I'm going to vote for him this time. And I support him. But at that time, I was that person walking in the booth making up my mind.
Okay. So you can relate.
Yeah.
How about you, Andrew?
Yeah, I was decided in 2016, and actually I voted for Gary Johnson too.
Nice.
But then I did vote for Trump in 2020. So very similar experience. I cannot relate insofar as not knowing, though. I've never walked into a voting booth not knowing.
So, yeah, a lot of strange things with the way elections are done now, and it's changing. And sometimes you can, kind of stand your ground and say, no, we're not going to put up with these changes. And sometimes you have to say, okay, this change has happened. We're going to have to embrace it and really push it. And that's what the Republicans are trying to do this time with early voting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the real concern ultimately that early voting, yay or nay, is less of a concern for me because it doesn't impact the validity of election. It's voter fraud that is my bigger concern. And that's where the whole mail-in voting issue really starts to raise its ugly head.
Yeah.
Because that just opens up a whole potential for shenanigans to occur.
Yeah. I mean, that's the question of a free and fair election.
Yeah.
Right.
And that is the foundation of our form of government, the constitutional republic and democracy.
Yeah.
So if we cannot have a free and fair election, then we've got nothing.
Yeah, well, because you can't trust that people are voting, that the people have spoken. Effectively, that's what you don't have that guarantee. Going back to the 2020 election, that's what motivated a bunch of people to, storm the Capitol, you could say, or go in and voice their opposition to.
Right. That's certainly why they were protesting there. Yeah.
Their protest was because they did not believe that we had a free and fair election. Now, you can argue one way or another on that.
You can't argue, though.
But what the trouble is, you have to, if you're going to prevent future events like that from occurring, you have to do your utmost as a government, if you're wanting to be a government that's going to be trustworthy to the people, to be as committed to voter integrity as possible. Like,
yes,
there is no watering down of the vote or inclusion of illegal votes or multi-voting or any of these other ways in which elections can have fraud involved in them.
Yeah. So what you're saying is the DOJ shouldn't sue Virginia just before the election to stop them cleaning up their voter rolls?
Right. I mean, that...
Because that's happening this time.
That's kind of the antithesis of providing, I guess, trust in your government.
Right. You just, because of historic examples of voter disenfranchisement, especially you could say during Jim Crow in the South and things, there's this legacy of state governments having, and even local governments having, engaged in practices to suppress the vote of certain groups of people.
Right.
And that it has existed. And so because of that past history, there's this excuse of basically, well, we want to do almost nothing to potentially suppress the vote. Well,
it's a knee jerk. That's a pendulum swing.
Right. You can't just let anybody vote who claims that they are allowed to vote, just so you don't potentially suppress somebody's vote.
Right. You've gone too far in the make sure everyone votes direction when, like I did in 2020, you receive a ballot in the mail addressed to you where all you have to do is check off whoever you want to vote for and write your signature at the bottom and send it back. I didn't vote by mail, but I got that ballot without requesting it. I lived with leftists at the time who voted for Biden. So if they'd gotten that piece of mail and had a mind to, they could have signed my name on it and made me vote for Biden instead of who I voted for.
Yeah, and the question is, how often does that happen? If you don't really know who's getting the ballots and it's happening in mass, that's a huge red flag.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
You have to show that you are trustworthy so the public trusts you. If the public doesn't trust you, they're not going to trust the results of the election.
Yeah. You have to, transparency, consistency, and standards have to be maintained. When you start messing around with those things, and what you invite is a questioning of the results of anything.
Right.
And anytime you do that, you're going to invite it. And so
count the votes on election night. If at all possible, encourage your state, wherever you live, to actually count the votes on election night. Because when it stretches out, when there's a water line break, and then once they get back to counting, suddenly all the votes go one direction, that does not encourage trust. That encourages distrust.
It wasn't a band name. Isn't that a band name? One Direction?
Yes, One Direction. Yeah. A little bit of sad news about, I think one of their members just died in the past week.
Did he?
All right, moving on from One Direction, which is not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
All right, we've kind of covered the state of the race. We've covered some of the factors here. Let's do kind of the fun bit and wrap this up a little bit with, there's 7 swing states: Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. Let's all give our predictions on where we think these 7 states are going to go. And I can plug it in and tell you what the vote count will be. So, Thomas, do you want to start?
Me first? Okay. I'm going to, let's see. I'm going to start with Pennsylvania.
All right.
And I
that is probably the most important one.
It's the keystone state, and I think it's the key to this election outcome. Trump has steadily fared very well in Pennsylvania this time around. I do think Harris has misstepped there, and I do think he will take Pennsylvania.
Okay. All right. That's a big one for Trump.
North Carolina has always kind of, every time they think it's going to go to the Democrat, but Trump has won it both times. I think he'll do it again, just because even though there was the storm that devastated so much of the state they're recovering from, I think they've worked hard to ensure as much as possible the people in the western part of the state their ability to vote.
Yeah. And that's important because the western
Right.
part of the state is,
Tends to be.
if you've ever driven around there, you
Yeah.
see lots of Trump signs.
I think so. I think he does take North Carolina again.
All right. That puts him at 254. He just needs 16 more votes to get to 270, 16 more electoral votes.
Yeah. So now and I do think I'm going to go ahead and go this one. He is going to, I think, get Georgia this time around.
All right. And that would do it. Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia
Yeah.
would get Trump to 270. That would be a win,
Right.
even if he lost everything else.
So, yeah, I think Michigan, I just don't know how to think about Michigan. I don't know if I'm going to say he does actually break that too. I think he takes Michigan.
Yeah, that one's probably, of these, maybe the iffiest at the moment. Pennsylvania, he's up a little bit at the moment, more than Michigan.
I don't know if he's going to get Wisconsin. He seems to always like...
He always makes it close in Wisconsin.
Yeah, and it just doesn't seem to happen.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say give Wisconsin to Harris.
All right.
And I don't trust Nevada. That goes to Harris.
Okay. Yeah. Nevada doesn't seem trustworthy on these things.
Arizona is a hard one too.
And the big thing there is Maricopa County, right?
Yeah, Maricopa, it's...
They had some of the election issues last go around, but they are just...
Well,
it's a very Democrat area.
Let's do this. One of the things that we've seen in the polls, and if the polls hold, Trump is actually winning when it comes to Hispanics.
That's true.
So let's go and give Arizona to him.
All right. That's a pretty solid win. 296 electoral college votes for Trump to Harris's 242. That's what Thomas thinks will happen. I think pretty good chance. Any non-swing states you want to change, or do you think they're all where they should be?
No, I think I would leave it at that. Right. I think that's, yeah.
I'll
leave it there.
All right. 296. That's
so
Thomas's
Harris would take two of the swing states.
Yeah. Nevada and Wisconsin.
Yeah.
All right. Andrew?
I think North Carolina and Georgia go Trump.
All right.
I think PA goes Harris.
Oh.
I think Michigan and Wisconsin go Harris.
Okay.
I think Arizona goes Trump and Nevada goes Harris.
Okay. So without looking at Nevada and Arizona, Harris has already won. You said Nevada and Arizona. Which way?
Nevada is blue. Arizona's red.
All right. It's pretty likely if Trump were only going to win 3 of these swing states, it would be North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona, most likely. This would bring it to a Kamala win, 276.
I don't want that to happen, by the way. I mean, obviously PA is a huge
it is
player in this whole scenario, and I'm just not sure about PA.
Yeah. So we're hoping Andrew's wrong. Write in hate mail to Andrew.
I hope to be wrong too. That's just what I think.
All right. So I'll give this a go. So I'm going to agree. Georgia's the state he's the highest up at the moment. It's over 2 points in all the averages, or about 2 points, I think, on 538. So I'm giving Trump Georgia. Arizona's a little iffy, but I think he's doing pretty well there too. That's his second biggest lead. So I'm going to have to give him Arizona. So North Carolina, I do think I agree. It always looks kind of like it's going to go blue, and then it doesn't.
Especially after this whole storm.
Well, yeah, Trump has gotten a lot of good press around the storm because he's been there helping people.
I think
the only question, it's not
storms.
Do the people of North Carolina support Trump or Harris more? It's, are the people in Western North Carolina going to be able to vote and show their support? That's the only question here.
Sure.
I'm going to assume they do manage to get to vote, and I'm going to say it goes to Trump. Tricky with these last 4. I'll give Wisconsin to Harris as well. I think that's probably Trump's hardest swing state to win. I have in my heart a belief in the people of Nevada, not Las Vegas, but the rest of the state.
Okay.
I believe in Nevada. I'm giving Nevada to Trump. And then, so here's the thing. In Michigan, Lizzo just gave a speech talking about how if Harris wins, the whole country will be Detroit.
What?
So, clearly that's going to swing that state for her. I don't know how people are going to respond to that. Maybe the people of Michigan are really like Detroit proud, and like, we got to make this go blue for that.
Detroit's coming back, but
it's a slow coming back compared to where it was.
Think about the reasons why it went down.
Yeah. So I think she could win Michigan. I think I'm going to give her Michigan. And then I actually think Trump has done such a good job in Pennsylvania so he did the Butler rally where he was shot at.
Yeah.
That's where my shirt comes from.
Yeah.
Then he did another Butler rally months later to be like, I'm not scared. And he went
As
up on
I
stage.
was saying.
Exactly. Yeah. He went up on stage and he said, as I was saying, and pointed to the same graphic that saved his life, that he says saved his life.
That was gold.
And then this just beautiful McDonald's photo op, which is one of the best campaign stunts I've seen in my lifetime. Mm-hmm. That was also in Pennsylvania. I think he's going to be able to take Pennsylvania. That would put him at 287, Harris at 251, and Trump would win. I do think there's a good chance he could win the other two swing states, Michigan and Wisconsin, but I think being safe, I'll give those to her.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So Thomas has Trump winning by the most.
Yeah. And just based upon how the polling is looking right now, based upon historic polling trends and him out polling, generally speaking, in his last two elections, it wouldn't surprise me if he swept all these.
Right. Yeah.
And if he does that, he is really running away with this election.
That is definitely worth noting. If Trump outperforms the polls the way he has in the past, then states like Virginia are suddenly a coin flip. Yeah. And even New Hampshire, I think. New Hampshire is a little bit farther away than Virginia, but Virginia is suddenly a coin flip. Minnesota is suddenly a coin flip. Even New Mexico is only going to lean a little bit towards the Democrats in that situation.
Yeah. How tight is Minnesota? Because that surprised me if that's a coin flip.
It's not quite 5 points, but I think sometimes Trump's done better than 5 points.
Really?
Better. No, it's 5 points in Minnesota. So yeah, if he does 5 points better than the polls, which he's done before, he could win Minnesota.
The hard thing to me with that is it's Walz's home state.
But Walz is the worst.
I know. And maybe that actually hurts Harris there.
I heard a comedian describe him in the best way possible, the Great Walls of China.
Yeah, I know. Minnesota hasn't gone for a Republican in 40 years. How long has it been?
Well, I know that's the one state that Reagan didn't win in 84, so it might be
It's been a long time. Yeah. So I don't know. That would be shocking if Trump is the one that flips Minnesota.
If there's a Democrat who can lose pretty much any state, it's going to be Kamala Harris, though. I mean, we keep saying it's the weakest Democrat candidate ever, and they keep getting weaker.
Well, I mean, you say that, but, Biden won.
Biden won from the basement. He won.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, before we close out, I want to share a brief anecdote about an experience I had in Duluth, Georgia. I went down to the Trump rally at the Gas South station in Duluth, Georgia, with hopes of entering the rally, but it was so popular that they maxed out the arena with at least 2,000 or 3,000 people, myself included, standing outside, hoping to get in. But a few things that I noticed about the crowd. One, very diverse, extremely diverse. I saw all kinds of people from every walk of life.
That's exciting.
I heard all kinds of different languages being spoken, which was a little bit unexpected, but they were wearing Trump hats, so that was interesting. Big Black community turnout, big Asian community turnout, big Latino community turnout, and everyone was very polite. Everyone was very orderly. There was not a piece of trash on the ground. And this is like probably close to 20,000 people on the grounds.
Wow.
The arena maxed out at like 13,000, and there were many thousands more outside. I don't know exactly how many.
Right.
When the words came through the crowd that, hey, they're closing it down, nobody else is getting in, you would think that people would start getting really upset. Nope.
Wow.
No one was upset. There were people disappointed, of course, myself included, but it was very orderly.
Well, it's excitement of seeing that many people. I mean, when you hear, there's so many inside that you can't get inside, and this is about an election and you're supporting your candidate, you're going, well, it's too bad I didn't get to see him, but that's exciting.
Yeah, and in a swing state, and Duluth is just outside Atlanta, right?
That's right,
yeah. Sorry.
So it was quite an interesting experience. I mean, there were a few people, counter-protesters. They were very odd-looking people. I will say that kindly. And there were like 5 of them.
Yeah.
And that was it. So no violence, no disagreements, really.
So hang on. These are MAGA lunatics, Andrew. You're telling me they weren't behaving like MAGA lunatics?
I mean, in every crowd, there are a couple crazies, and there were a couple crazies, like 2.
Okay. All right. See?
No, I think that...
But they were regular people. I'll end on this. it felt like what I was told every day growing up as a child. This is America.
Wow.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, capturing that. And I think that comes to kind of the last point I'll make here, which is the one they always look to. And you'll start hearing them talk about this down the home stretch. And that's the voter enthusiasm between the two candidates. The only time that I can think of where voter enthusiasm was high and the candidate did not win was last election. I felt like Trump definitely had more of the voter enthusiasm. This time around, I think the Democrats are trying to replicate the same play that Biden used, which is effectively Trump is terrible and scary, vote for me and I'll bring back normalcy. I don't think it's working too well this time around. I think people aren't buying the Trump is Hitler 2.0. Even though, yesterday, Harris literally pulled that one out.
Said Trump meets the definition of a fascist.
Of a fascist like Hitler.
But and this is the thing I think Republicans should be screaming from the rooftops every time Democrats say that. They were thankful that he survived an assassination attempt. Called him up and being like, I'm so glad you're safe. Pray for our country. There's no place for violence in our country. So both of those things can't be true.
Yeah.
Trump can't be a fascist and you're grateful when someone fails to kill him. If he's a fascist, you wouldn't be grateful when that happens.
Yeah. It's just, it's moves like that are elements of an apparent desperation. What that says to me is they're not liking what they're seeing in the polls on the Democrat side. The voter enthusiasm, I think, is going to start being talked about, and it's clearly behind Trump. I don't see it behind Harris. She's just not exciting. She's not an exciting candidate to support. They try to play up she'll be the first woman of color to be president. But I even get the sense that they're not excited that she would actually be the first to break that glass ceiling. I think they're kind of like, wouldn't it be nicer if we had a better candidate that we could talk like that about?
Yeah. And, we are still about 2 weeks out, just a little bit less, 12 days.
Yeah.
And the difference between a close election and a landslide election is not actually that many votes. It's, if the right people turn out in Pennsylvania and Arizona or whatever, then suddenly what looked like a close election all the way up until election day ends up being a landslide for one candidate or the other.
Very much could be. Yeah. I think if we do see a landslide, it'll be Trump.
Yeah. I think if Harris wins, it'll be...
I just can't imagine Harris landslide.
I don't think it's a Harris landslide.
Yeah. I think she has a chance to win, but it's going to be, if she wins, it'll be under 300 electoral votes for certain.
Yeah, it'll be tight.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been the Pop Culture Contrarian podcast with Thomas, Sterling, and Andrew. Make sure to give us a like, hit that subscribe bell on YouTube, leave us a comment, let us know what you think. And, we'll try to maybe read your comment on the air if we really like it. And we're brought to you by the Patriot Post, which is the oldest conservative news digest on the web. It's right and it's free. Be sure to like and subscribe. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
See you guys.